think it's always been, I guess like a lifelong interest. I was always kind of like an artistic kid. Um, I, my siblings are like a much larger age difference than I am, so I kind of spent a lot of time alone. And by doing that, I don't know, I always was at home. I used to always like write plays and put on like performances and make like different like props and things like that when I was younger. And then it kind of just continued into like painting. And then I made a lot of like mixed media stuff in high school. So I think it's just kind of like a part of who I became to be. Um, yeah, that's kind of a roundabout answer to that. Uh, Definitely I got serious about it in high school. I think once I started to kind of like realize like, okay, what is my future going to be? Thinking about college, all of that, I was like, okay, yeah, wait, I'm going to commit to art. I'm going to do this. So I think that's when I more seriously considered it. I think even like as early as like elementary school, it became like kind of a part of how I saw myself. So I think those are the earlier stages of it, I guess.
As an
Yeah,
artist?
absolutely. Absolutely. I actually just finished um I kind of I've said to someone my stuff is on tour right now, so I was like I was in the studio working on it for a year, but now it's on tour. But I just finished this big collection of works, and I just took it down at a community college recently. So now it's going on to another gallery, but it's a collection of works. It's in line with a lot of the other things I've made, a lot of like these weird alien sculptures, and then continuing on this kind of world building thing that I tap into of like wanting to make these alien objects that are either being scientifically studied or medically studied, and kind of splaying them out like they're these things that people are trying to figure out. And I put a lot of tubes and like white tiling around things to kind of give it that sterile feeling. I think just my forever inspirations are like science fiction, but without like intergalactic warfare science fiction. Like I'm very intrigued about like alien designs and like how they're like practical effects of how they're done in those types of movies. And then also how that can apply to like how I make objects. Yeah, I love this because I think it's kind of taps into the core of what gets me really, really excited about art is I love cheap materials. All of my materials are super cheap and just kind of like a conglomerate of a bunch of stuff I can get at Lowe's, which I love. But I think what drew me to sculpture, because when, this lifelong interest I've had in art, it's always been two-dimensional. It never was three-dimensional. And it wasn't until I went to college and I said, hey, I want a challenge. I want to do something kind of vastly different. I feel like I've exhausted my limits of two-dimensional art. I want to do something totally different than that. And that's what brought me to sculpture. And that's what made me, decide that to be my major. But also, I found it to be more, it almost like when you're making a three-dimensional object and you can pick it up and like manipulate it with your hands and put it in a space, it feels more real in some ways. And it definitely helps me continue this like story building or the world building that I really am so interested in my art. It felt really important that it felt real to me. Like when I stepped in to a space with my sculptures, I wanted them to feel like real living things. I just don't think I could have ever gotten there with like a painting or a two-dimensional thing. So I don't know. I think sculpture just felt the most fulfilling in that way. I don't sketch, and I say that with an asterisk. I don't sketch initially. I start kind of putting things together, and seeing what shapes form. And then once I'm at a place where I'm like, okay, like I've made this object, that's when I start to sketch out like how I want to do the installation of the work, which is why like having sculptures, I feel like it's so important to like think about how it lives in the universe. So like how I'm going to install it in a gallery or in a space or wherever I'm going to show it. That's when I start to sketch. That's when I'm like, okay, I have this object. I know how I feel about it. How do I stage it to communicate? I want it to feel like an alien. I want it to feel like it's being studied. How do I arrange it? How do I light it? How do I do all of that? And that's where the kind of it's less sketching and more just like planning the logistics around it. So that's where I get is the more when I actually have to think about it. I initially I don't think. I don't know if that's good or bad. So, the things that I make, they take so long to make. So well, if I'm wanting to start something new, mentally prepare myself. I go into the studio. I start kind of so like I guess on like a material level. So I make this like paper pulp base to like put around foam. I stack pieces of foam to kind of get a general shape, and then I put this paper pulp around it. So the first steps is me cutting up pieces of foam and kind of arranging it to get the general shape and height that I want. And then I go in with the paper pulp. So that's like kind of that first step of like, okay, I'm figuring out the shape of this object. This is just kind of like the rough bones of it. So once that's, the chaos of that and redoing it and it's dried and all of that, that's when I go in. I use a lot of kind of like joint compound or plaster for the walls. And I tint that with like different like India inks or honestly, anything that can produce a color, I throw it in there. And then I start applying that to the surface. I add different, I put a lot of foam clay on the outside to give like different like textural changes. I make like little holes. So that takes a really long time. It's doing that part of it and kind of doing that surfacing. So I'll go back and forth of applying the plaster, sanding it away, putting it back, sanding it away to kind of get this like weathered look that I want. And then I will, once I have that done, I guess is then I just coat everything in like an epoxy resin just so it'll stay up and it has this sheen to it. And then that's when, once I get that finished, is when then I can go in and start planning out the composition of it. I always feel like it's so stressful. Like, it's like this whirlwind of like you're in there and you're making it and everything's dirty. And I'm like, oh, I'm so stressed. Like, gosh, I don't know where I'm going with this. And then finally, I think the only time I'm like, whew, I'm really happy is when I get it installed, is when I'm like, oh wow, like I really see what I was going for now. Like, ooh, that really comes through, that really doesn't come through. Those are the moments of resolution that I get. I feel like I never feel like when I'm making work that it's done. It always is like constantly worked on. I think um, it's changed aesthetically a lot. It's changed a lot with, I guess, the kind of like, tonally, before it used to be much darker when I was earlier in college. I felt like I gravitated towards like more like scary imagery, more brutal, or like more like just visceral things. And I think maybe that's just like the angst of like an early college student. And then as I've gotten a little older, I've liked to have things a little bit more, I don't know, I feel like tonally, like the color of my works, they've gone a lot lighter. They seem a lot less rough around the edges. They're cleaner in a lot of ways. Yeah, I think they just got a little bit more pleasant, I guess. I really, really love it's actually a painter, like a really famous. I love Francis Bacon, the painter.
Hmm.
I he has those kind of like gruesome bodily things, which like I'm not a painter, so I my translation of those ideas are different, but I do like how he kind of like distorts and makes things look alien, even though it's like representing like body parts or things like that. I really love his paintings. I find a lot of inspiration from them. Um, but I mean, that's more of like a straightforward artist. I think beyond that, I really, really love like practical effects, like in movies and like either sci-fi or I love horror movies. So I see a lot of practical effects in that way too. So just looking at how people make goopy, gross things is really interesting. So I get a lot of inspiration from that too. I feel like I have a million thoughts. I, well, I think one that I think is really important for like definitely young artists. And when I've talked to, I'm young, but even younger than me, is that I feel like people get really, really like um they really fan or romanticize that like every piece of artwork you're gonna make is this like explosion of like, oh, all this creativity and energy and it's so deep and meaningful. And sometimes it's not, sometimes it's just fun and it's you can make like art making and working through things and investigating things just something for yourself. You don't even have to consider that, oh, is someone going to get meaning from this? Is this a good representation of who I am? Like sometimes art and making it and thinking about it really is just like a better understanding of yourself. So, there's so much artwork that I just never show anyone and I never will. That's for me that I want people to have those things that are for themselves. And I think in doing that, you'll find that like as you continue to be an artist that you kind of find a lot of inspiration from those little moments that you have with your just for yourself art that you make that I don't know. I feel like it's important to not think too much about it and just kind of do it, I guess. Um, I think I mean, my artistic journey, I'm still like very early in it. Just a couple years graduated out of college and I'm still so in the very beginning stages. So, I'll definitely change, I'm sure, and even probably the next 2 years, 3 years of making work that yeah, I think it's exciting. And I love talking art with anybody at any stage in their lives. So yeah, that's the only caveat about my stuff is that I'm super, super young and super early into it. So, it's just my experience at this moment.